People often say, think of us as a technology company. We are not a technology company. We are storytellers. And we use technology to tell stories, turn digital data into pictures people can understand. And it doesn't matter what it is. If it's an air traffic control simulator, if it's a visualization of the rebuild of Christchurch, if it's an AI program, these are things we've done that teaches numeracy and literacy in prisons. What is it doing? It's telling stories.
The New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, your strategic and proactive IT partner.
Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Business Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and today we're joined by Sir Ian Taylor. Sir Ian is the founder and managing director of Animation Research Limited, a company renowned globally for its cutting-edge computer animation and sports graphics. From his earliest days as a television presenter to leading one of Australasia's most innovative and enduring tech company, Sir Ian's career has been marked by a relentless pursuit of excellence and innovation. Under his leadership, Animation Research has revolutionised the way we experience sports, with their virtual eye technology becoming a staple in lifting the visualisation of sailing, cricket, golf and other popular sporting events. Sir Ian's contributions to technology and business have been widely recognised. He was inducted into the New Zealand High-Tech Hall of Fame Flying Kiwi in 2009, named North and South Magazine's New Zealander of the Year in 2010, and in 2021 he was knighted for his services to broadcasting, business and the community.
The New Zealand Business Podcast is proudly brought to you by Gorilla Technology, the tech services firm for astute, medium and smaller New Zealand organisations. If you or your team want to lift your competitiveness by better leveraging technology such as artificial intelligence whilst minimising cybersecurity and data risks, then get in touch to find out how Gorilla Technology can help you. Well, welcome along, Ian Taylor. Great to have you on the New Zealand Business Podcast. I've been following your journey for a long time, but it'd be great to sort of start at the beginning. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about where you were born and where you grew up back to the early days.
Well, maybe that journey for a long time that you just mentioned, put it in context. There's a Māori whakatauki which, when translated as the footsteps we laid down in our past, create the paving stones of where we stand today, which in the Māori worldview is always in front of us. So I like to always start, I was born in Kaio, brought up in a little place called Ropunga. But as I look out there, I can see, I was 8 years old. I can still see the shirt I was wearing when the man from the Hawke's Bay Electric Power Board turned up and brought electricity to our house. And with a flick of a switch, lit up the house, with a light bulb, an electric light bulb. And I see that really clearly. And if I think about the footsteps that bring me here today, and I guess, I'm here because you look at what we do in the world of technology and storytelling and internationally, that's the journey that's been in place. Mm. I went to school and, born in Kaio, came down to Ropunga, which is where my mother from is, Ngati Kahungunu, and then was sent off to a boarding school in Masterton at the age of 11. Went and did 6 weeks of a business degree at Victoria before one of my schoolmates turned up, knocked on the door and said, "Hey, we need a singer for the band." There's a band called Calculated Risk, and Carl Evanson, who had left them and gone to sing for the Formula, and they were in the Battle of the Bands that weekend. So I thought, I'll go and do that. And then when we finished, he said, "So was that of interest to you?" And I thought, well, it's a lot more fun than the 6 weeks I've had doing business. So I joined the band. So they had a few years at the band. And then I got called up in the army in the last of the military call-ups. And I always joke, I've never even won a chocolate cake in a raffle. This one, there were only 2 dates in July, and one of those was mine.
But so this was based on birth date, was it?
But they were based on birth dates.
Yeah, okay.
And it was really time to pause. And if I look at those footsteps, I can see places where I consciously stepped another way. And nobody consciously, happily steps into the army, but it just felt like time. There was a reason. And we just played with a band that opened for us who had an amazing singer called Willie Davidson. And I just said to the guys, "Look, I've been called up. This guy sings better than I do. I'll just go do the army. Why don't you bring him on?" And that's what they did.
Wow.
So I did the army. I'll try and do this quickly, headed off. When I came out of the army, I had no idea what I was going to do. The best place we'd played when I was in the band was Dunedin. We toured all over over country, even opened for the Beach Boys. But I rang up some people in Dunedin, got a job at Spates Brewery, went down and worked there for a year, then thought I'd better go and do something serious, did a law degree, finished my law degree, went out to get a job, and somebody said, you know, they're auditioning for Spot On, kids program. So I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. So I did the audition, got the job, and had to make the call. Law or Spot On was a no-brainer.
Wow.
I did Spot On, which brings me to what I do now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd never be doing what we do now.
Yeah. So it's all those sort of, dots and footsteps sort of connected up. So, I mean, jumping back a little bit to your childhood, getting the electricity turned on, that's a really big deal, right? I mean, we look at society today, and there isn't that much that doesn't rely on electricity. So what did that sort of change in your world and in your mind at that time?
Well, I'd seen electricity because we would drive into Wairoa. There were movie theatres, there were lights. We just didn't have it at our place. And as I said, I was 7 or 8 before it turned up. So I was brought up with Mum cooking on a coal fire range. I always talk about, Dad listened to a program called Life with Dexter on a battery-powered radio. We read comics by the light of a gas lamp, and then electricity turned up. And it's only in the context of the footsteps we laid down in the past being in front of you that grows rather than diminishes. So, it was really cool that we had lights. But because it sits out there, and I honestly can still see the shirt I was wearing, you see that connection all the way through to today. And I think probably at the core of it is curiosity. It's kind of like, when it happened, having not had it, I was curious to know, how does that happen? So, when I saw my first television, it was like, how does that happen? Or how do these voices travel over here to get to that radio? I never ever bothered to go look for the answers, but I was always curious about how it happened. And I think curiosity, if I look back at all the footsteps, I have been surrounded in this business by super curious people.
That's a real key, particularly in the modern world where things are evolving so quickly. So now back to this pivotal decision that you made around university versus playing in a band. At that stage, did you spend a lot of time thinking about it, or was it just one of those a very easy sort of on the spur of the moment decision of, hey, this is more fun, let's do it?
Exactly. I mean, it was the 60s.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the night, in the Battle of the Bands. I think we got second, and it was a no-brainer, And it is one of the things I've always done. If I've reached a crossroad and I can see a number of them, not a lot, but when I reach that crossroad, it's always, what would I enjoy doing more of these options? What would I like to do? Not how rich will it make me, or what could I do what would I like to do?
So that was that a strategic decision? Was
No.
that you looking out ahead, or was it more
It's
a
immediate.
short term?
It's always immediate.
Yeah.
You've got a choice. You're going to go this way or that way. I think I'd enjoy better going that way. Not, it will be better for me. That looks like fun. And it was an easy decision actually back, in the 60s when I made that decision about university or the band, because unemployment was zero. So all you were going to do was go off and do it maybe for a year, 2 years, who knows? But when it's finished, I know I can get a job because jobs are everywhere.
Yes.
And I'll decide which job I do. So, that's changed hugely. And, maybe if I had to make that call today, it would be different, perhaps. But back then, I was 18. There was plenty of time, and jobs were not an issue. You just got to choose which one you did. And right now, this was a job. And, I've always, again, looking back, everybody, you think about, well, there was 3 years of fun. You wouldn't have learnt much there. It was 3 years of the most valuable learnings. I actually wouldn't swap it for going to a business school now, because it was a business school. It was a real world one where there were 5 of us, and we were running a business. We were in each other's pockets every day. So you had to learn how to work as a team. What you had to do was understand your clients because, we travelled from one place to another in a Leyland van with a trailer on the back.
Yes.
And so you went to the next concert. You had to make sure, you had to hope that enough people turned up to pay to see you so that you could at least pay for the accommodation that night and put petrol in the van to go to the next place. So that's an
So it was
enormously...
quite hand to mouth.
Yes, it was, but that wasn't the lesson. The lesson was know your customer,
Great learnings.
And you wouldn't think that being in a band did that, but actually you needed the most people to turn up. So you had to offer something for someone to be bothered to come down to the Featherston Town Hall or the Roxburgh Town Hall to listen to you play. So really valuable lesson.
You would no doubt have new challenges every day, every week, things to deal with.
You mean while we were on the band?
On the
I mean,
road?
there were the logistics. There was, there was a lot of stuff. Probably one of the most valuable lessons I learned was when we opened for the Beach Boys. And, everybody,
What an opportunity. Wow.
Well, you do say that. The biggest lesson I learnt when we opened for the Beach Boys was that everyone in the town, in the hall, waiting for the Beach Boys were going, "Oh, you're not singing another one, are you? Bring on the Beach Boys." So it's a very humbling experience.
Yeah.
I know we used to drive into towns and we had these posters, big stack of posters in the back of the van. And the first thing we did was drive around the town and put posters on lampposts, on windows, on, anywhere we could find them. It amped up a bit later when we made our first record and we started doing stuff on TV and, that shifted the game a bit. But the most valuable learnings were those first ones when a team of 5 people ran a business.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get feedback from your customer, other than whether they whether they attended or not, or whether they walked out of the the gig? What were the other sort of ways in which that took place?
But I don't think there is another way. It's the real world right in front of you. You walk into a hall and it's either full or it's empty.
Yeah.
They were generally pretty full, and the reaction was the look on their faces, or whether they were singing along with you, or whether they danced, and so we were always adjusting our roster of songs as well, because you'd do these and that one always works, so we'll always open with that, or that goes somewhere. So there's nothing like your face-to-face real-world experience with your clients. No, they weren't clients, with the people who turned up to have fun.
Yeah.
That changed, of course, when you started making records. The measure was, did it actually sell? Where was it on the charts? It was a different perspective, and you were removed from it a bit.
Mm. Now, going into the army, what did that look like? And did you learn similar lessons in that, environment about leadership? And I guess there were a whole range of things.
Yeah, I'm really glad I did it. It was, again, sobering because, came straight out of a band. I went from a band with my hair down to past my shoulders. I still remember going in and being called in, and we went to this big kind of barracks, and we were all there, and we were all lined up, and the sergeant, I think it was actually a corporal, marched along the thing and says, "All right, stand up straight." And they go, "Anyone here a barber?" And nobody put their hand up. You're now barbers. Cut their hair.
Wow.
I think I caught a cold. It was in Wairuru, and my hair went from there to none. And I think from memory I caught a cold because of it. But it was a big step. One of the other things, I guess, a memory that stands out is valuing your freedom and your ability to do what you want. So here I am hitting turning points and going, I'm going to go that way, but not in the army. And I can still remember sitting in Wairau, looking out at the highway down on the other side of the fence and thinking, those people can stop anywhere they want. They could pull in and have a milkshake. Wonder where they're going. I can't. There is no way. And so there's a shift to valuing your freedom and the choices you have. The other really important message for learning that came from me out of that was everything should be judged in context. And so I remember, even as we looked out and suddenly we've got those kind of violations that were happening in Vietnam and places, I stepped back from those because they taught me in the army how to kill. I mean, that's what the job of the soldier was, and it's kill or be killed. And it's a different perspective that I am glad I had. But I recall we trained for Vietnam, and I recall running through forest with hand grenades, lifting up the covers of holes that represented where the Viet Cong did, and throwing hand grenades in, dropping them and running on. Now, there was nobody down there, but if I was in the real situation, it is what I'm trained to do, and your training determines what you do in that space. So it doesn't forgive the kind of atrocities that happened, but it did give me a different perspective. I'll give you a different example. So when I was sent off to this boarding school, it was a Catholic boarding school, and I never knew I was a Catholic. I was 11. I had no idea. And then suddenly I was being sent to this Catholic boarding school.
Yeah.
And in the very first week, I was sitting in the dining room table, and the Marist brother, Brother Morris, I'd never forgotten his name, again, key moments, hit me over the back of the head and said, "You're not on the par now, Hoary." And I tell that story, and people, and maybe some of your listeners now, are shocked in this time and go, "Oh my God, how could someone say that to a little 11-year-old kid?" But then I say, let me share with you what the 11-year-old kid thought. It's all about context. As an 11-year-old, when Brother Morris did that to me, the thing that went through my mind first was, oh, when did I become a Hoary? My cousins are the Hoaries back in Ropunga, because Dad was the Pākehā teacher, Mum was the Māori teacher, but I was the white honky back in Ropunga. And the thing that occurred to me, the question that I asked was, when did I become a Hoary? Context, So the other thing that I'd say is that I know if Brother Morris was alive today, he would be incredibly proud of what this little Hoary had done.
What you shared in the army there, and training with grenades and so on, how do you think that changed your sort of mindset and your outlook on life? How did that sort of shape you for the
everything
future?
is in context. I mean, I think it's appalling. What I see with the wars and things that are happening now is just appalling. And so my experience in the army doesn't have me justifying what armies do. It's just that there's a context in which things happen. I just think what's happening today, it's one of those things that just remind you that humans aren't the prime species on the planet. Some of the things we do to each other is just unbelievable. It's just remarkable. So that's a different context. We've got to live with who we are, and what we've got to do is do our very best individually and live your beliefs.
So from the army, how long did you need to be in the army? Was that a
So it was
period of conscription?
There was a 6-month period first, and then for 3 years you had to go back, and you were on call. If they ever had called us up to go to Vietnam, I would have had to go, but fortunately we didn't do that.
Yeah. And then what were the things that shaped your decision to go and study, continue studies, and to take that in the direction of law?
Again, no big decision. So while I was working at the breweries, a guy called Marshall, they used to have these capping concerts in Dunedin, and they were magnificent. They were huge. They'd fill the town hall. And they used to, what part of it they started to do was the second half of all of them was a musical. And so I think it was either Tommy or Jesus Christ Superstar was the very first one they did. And Marshall Seifert called me up, and he was producing it, and said, "Hey, Ian, look, I'm looking, I know you're not at university, but I remember you being in the band. I'm looking for someone to play Herod in Jesus Christ Superstar. Are you doing anything? I thought, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So I went along and, Jesus, please allow me to introduce myself. And I did the capping concert, and we had a ball. And then the students, it just reminded me of what was there. So by the time that had finished, I thought, I better go back to university. I better go and do something. I can't keep driving the forklift at the breweries all the time. And again, there was a decision. I remember looking at the decision and going, so what would be cool, law or medicine? And I looked at both of those and thought, because I couldn't be bothered doing accounting, So law or medicine.
And these were the main options for
these
Otago.
These were the two that I was looking at,
Okay.
law or medicine. And then I looked at medicine and I went, that's going to take too long. I'll do law.
Okay.
So I went and did law.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things was, again, you had to do an art subject. And I chose, because it was I chose anthropology. And I found that really, really fascinating. So, I did the law stuff, but the thing that really stood out from my degree was anthropology and the way it looked at humans, mankind. It was just another whole thing. Accidental, and I only did it because it was the letter A. I didn't even know what it was.
That's great. So finishing up with your study, any sort of great memories from that time of sort of studying that you think shaped you in a particular way as well?
Well, this is the value of the footsteps, because you're always seeing them. So today in our industry, there's a lot of focus is placed on the small number of women working in the technology industry. It is growing. But in the context of those footsteps, when I did law in a class of probably 180 students in a lecture, there were 12 girls. And they were boys, we were girls in those days. There were 12.
Yeah.
Today, they are the majority of most of the lectures. So it's a thing of time. So when everybody is sort of pulling their hair out about, technology, it's a male-oriented, male-dominated thing. It wasn't a male-dominated thing. It was a geek-dominated thing. I mean, even as a male, when this stuff started, I'm like, that's not for me. Look at those geeks.
Yeah.
But as they said, one day the geeks will rule the world. So that it's a progression. And, we've got we run an internship with the Polytechnic in Dunedin, and we don't have any gender bias about who's in it, but half are girls and half are boys now. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And
so it's really
I
evolved.
think I've never kind of really embraced that whole idea of that gender inequality. Although we could talk about the pay equity thing, that debacle that's going on at the moment. And I guess again, it's in those footsteps, because I never used that word sexism, because I grew up in this Māori community where Pākehā looked into it and went, those Māori women, they have to sit in the second row and they have to do this, and the men do all the talking on the marae. They're not allowed to talk. But when you're brought up in it, you know that your aunties are the ones that get things done. And I have this, again, wonderful memory of being in on the marae in Ropunga up in the hall. And the marae was there, and then off to the side was the kitchen. And that's where all my aunties were, and that's where we were. And the slides were open while the men went around with their sticks and pontificated all over. And I still remember auntie sitting there, they're listening too. And my favourite one is one day one of my aunties just turned to one of the others and said, somebody go out there and tell them that ain't ever going to happen. So my image of Māori leadership is Dame Whenekūpa on the march with a young moko beside her.
Yes.
That is my total image of Māori leadership. And that's women with power. But gentle power, but power nonetheless.
Yes. I'm pondering, how that has sort of shaped your journey in terms of, what you've learnt, from Māoridom.
Actually, now I'm going to sort of acknowledge one of my sons. I have two sons, but Ben, who was 2 when I started this business, now works with me. He went off to the States. He got his business degree there. And he started I've gone joining me on my speeches. And I remember the first day I said, why don't you just come on? I'll introduce you because it's this great way to introduce you because I've got a video of him when he was really little at work. And you come on and you tell your story about this. I had no idea what he was going to say. One of the things, but he got up and one of the things he acknowledged, he said, Dad always talks about not having a business plan, never having written a business plan. And he said, I grew up thinking that was normal. Then I went off to the States to do a business degree in the States.
Yes.
And he said, I'm sitting there and there's all of these things about business plans and stuff. And he said, the lecturer said, so anybody has got an idea of, what's a starting point for a business plan? And nobody put up, and Ben put his hand up and he said, bugger the boxing, pour the concrete anyway. And he said, there was this stunned silence. But that was my philosophy when I talked about, I didn't have a business plan, but we had a mission statement and it was bugger the boxing, pour the concrete anyway. And then he said, I suddenly learned, very quickly that there were such things as business plans. That was what I was there. But he said, then he said, as I look at what Dad has done, I realised that he always had a business plan. He just didn't have the words to explain it and describe it until he started exploring Te Māori again, his Māori roots. So whānau, whakapapa, the footsteps. He started to do that. And what I learned was, what I believe is he didn't need to go to a business school. The best business school for him was sitting around the kitchen table listening to his aunties. And everything they have said, they would say, is valid in every business today. They just pass it on a different way. And at the core of it is caring for your people. You are not creating a business. You are creating a family. And everything about what you do is intergenerational. And that's what he learned at the table, not from his uncles, from his aunties. And that's the best business school you can have.
Wow. Yeah, that's certainly a viewpoint that's probably not so common today.
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I do see it because it was interesting. When COVID hit, that year was going to be our best year ever. I mean, we just signed contracts everywhere, and suddenly within the space of 2 weeks, it was all gone, the whole lot. So we'd gone from the best year ever to zero. I was in America at the time, and there were 11 of us overseas, and so we gathered everybody together to bring them home. And I remember I called our CEO Cheryl and said to Cheryl, hey, listen, I know this is going to be disastrous now. All the income's gone. I'm just jumping on the plane with the team. We're flying home. When I get back, I want you to figure out how we bring all the team together and tell them no one's going to lose their job. See ya, and got on the plane. And when I got back, she'd figured out how. But that was non-negotiable. We are in this position, but nobody loses their jobs. And it wasn't, there is this thing about it's been family, these people, it's really important that we find a way that they stay. But from a business perspective, what was important was I watched companies laying people off immediately. And I just thought, you know what? When we come out of this, you guys are going to be running. We are going to be out front because the A team is still here. We will hit the ground running. And we sent everybody home and said, your job description now is you take care of yourselves and anybody in the house. There is nothing else. But what I want you to think about is what will the world look like when we come out of COVID, and what should we do to be in front of everyone? So don't ever use the word challenge with the word COVID. Only use the word opportunity. What are the opportunities? And one of those opportunities came from our head of technology. And again, I love sharing this. I'm not sure if he even has NCEA 3. He doesn't have any degrees at all, but he's our head of technology and innovation, came to us straight from school. But he called me from his father's farm and said, I've thought of an opportunity. I said, what's that, John? He said, well, what happens if the sports start again and we can't get there because the borders are closed? Because we had to be at all of them.
You were there physically in
You
person.
had to be at all of them. And I said, it did sound like a challenge to me, but I wasn't going to use that word. I said, so what's the opportunity? He said, well, I've been thinking about it. the opportunity for us, if we could do it all remotely from Dunedin, is enormous. I said, yeah, but has that ever been done? He said, no, but I've got some ideas. And this Curious team
Yeah.
got together remotely on Zoom and designed a system which, when the very first sport event went back to air, we did it remotely from New Zealand for the first time ever in the world. And we have been able to do all of them from there. And it just catapulted the business. If you'd designed a business that said it's a business that's not going to leave New Zealand, it was getting to be stretching the boundaries now because you had to travel to all of these places.
Yes.
COVID gave us the opportunity to go, this is how you do it now. And I think one of the things for me that was interesting was that at the time, everyone thought this would be a technology challenge. The technology had always been there. It had just never been joined up this way because nobody had thought of doing it remotely because there was no need to. And if COVID hadn't hit and we had called our clients and said, hey, we're going to do some experiments now to do it remotely, they would have said, why? This works. So what was the biggest change wasn't the technology, it was the attitude of our clients who went, actually, that's the, go for it. What can we do? You know, an interesting thing too about having those principles of, the idea, when we said we're not going to lay anybody off, just as a courtesy, I rang our major clients, two of them, Major League Baseball and golf, and just said, look, I just thought I'd give you a bell and just let you know, if you were worried, we are not laying off anybody. Everyone you work with now will be here when the sports start again. The A team is here for you. So I just thought you'd like to know. And they went, both places said, no one else has rung us to tell us that. In fact, we're watching most of them lay people off. In fact, we're laying people off. They said, this is incredible. How can we help? I said, well, I'm not sure. And they said, well, how are you going to fund this? And what we were doing every week, we were building golf courses that they paid for. They're maybe $30,000-$40,000 each. And we're doing the same for the Major League Baseball.
This is a digital.
Yeah, the digital versions of
Yeah,
it. Now, because there were the events weren't there, they didn't need them. But both places said, actually, would it help if we just kept building all the golf courses? We'll need them someday. So would it help if we paid you to keep doing that?
Wow.
And suddenly there was this income that was the result of a decision that was based on a Māori concept of family being shared with a whole Pākehā business globally, and all of them responded, with this, what can we do to help?
It's fantastic.
Mm.
Now, just jumping back a little bit to your TV career, it sounds like that was another one of these things that almost sort of fell into your lap.
Yeah. I mean, again, when you're doing a degree, I think that's another one of those things of context. When I was doing my degree, my fees were $15 a year for a law degree. Each term, I got a check for $240 or something. We got paid. The degrees were free. So we went through this whole space and time. Again, it's context. So none of the kids get that now. So we were really, really fortunate. So anyway, I kind of moseyed on through. And at the time too, you could always get a job to back everything up. So I worked as a barman, worked at this. And then one day in my last year, someone said, hey, they're auditioning for Play School. And so they rang and said, look, you used to be in a band, so why don't you come down and audition? So I can still remember going down and did Incy Wincy Spider climbing up the spout. And I got the job. And so it was really cool.
That's
so
awesome.
now, I could earn more in a half a day, than I could do for a week working as a barman.
Yes.
And I only had to do 2.5 days every 3 weeks. And nobody went to lectures anyway in those days because it was easy. So for 2.5 days, I'd get $250. I didn't have to work every 3 weeks.
Perfect.
And so that was good. So I did that. Then I came out, I finished my law degree. Now I was out interviewing for jobs and I had a job to go to and ran into Mike Stedman, who was the producer of Spot On. And he said, oh, did you know we're looking for a new reporter for Spot On. You know, I've seen you on Play School. Do you want the job? I thought, God, Spot On was one of the great shows of the time.
Oh,
I thought,
yeah.
oh my God, what do I have to do? He said, and I love this. How's this for an audition? He got the team together and we went to the City Hotel and drank them out of German white wine. We drank it all. There was no New Zealand wine at the time. So we drank German wine. We went back to the office in the Methodist Mission building, and big office, and there was a target on the wall, and he gave me a bow and arrow and said, if you hit the target, the job's yours. And Michael and I could never, ever remember whether I hit the target, but I got the job. And, you know, it shifted this whole course that led to where I am today.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So
See, my life's been easy.
it is pretty interesting, the sort of opportunities that we get along the way, but of course we all get the choices of which way to turn. And yeah, you look back at these very pivotal times, and if you looked at it through a different lens, you might have decided, no, I need to, you know,
Oh,
I
I'm
need to
sure
go in the
that-
direction
that-
of what I've studied and so on, right? So this time in television, that was a reasonable period that you spent in television before you started your own
at the
business,
time
right?
too, Dunedin was a really big production house. About 35% of all productions came out of Dunedin. So it was a big staff, so it was really, really valuable experience. And it's really interesting. Colour TV had just really started. You know, we were still shooting on, I think, film. You know, we were shooting with film cameras.
Yes.
And I can still remember the first tape machines arriving. So I've got this kind of journey through all of this technology
You
as
saw
well.
the technology and the innovation
and
just
you watch it
continuing
change really,
to come through.
really fast, and you
Yeah.
see the tape machines go, gee, this is going to change things. Oh, we can erase it. You know,
Speeds it
yeah,
up. Yeah.
yeah, we can speed it up, slow it down. We can so it was a really valuable experience. So I went from there, left Spot On, started a whole series called Something Ventured, where I went. And again, it was one of those really cool things. They just said, "Hey, would you like to start a documentary series? Well, if you did, what would it be? Why don't we do something like Something Ventured, where I go off and climb mountains and kayak rivers?" And so that's what I did. And it was sort of the forebear for the Natural History Unit, which started there as well.
Okay.
So it kind of just went through. Then I started directing and producing and, you know, a number of documentaries. And those were the days when money wasn't an issue. So you could spend a whole year making a documentary. And I did. So the next step happened. So I'd been there. It was probably 12, 14, 15 years, I think, before they decided to close Dunedin down. And that's when I thought, gee, what do I do now? And at the time I was doing Funniest Home Videos. So I was flying from Dunedin to Auckland to do Funniest Home Videos and back. And I just had this crazy idea, well, I'm not leaving Dunedin. They're closing the studios down. So I went up and talked to the boss of TVNZ while I was up there one day for Funniest Home Videos and said, what would it cost us would we be able to take over the studios and make this program down there as a starter? So we negotiated. He said, look, we could do it for $500,000. I had about $5 in the bank. But my bank manager, Andrew Wilson, I'll never forget. Again, these are key moments where people trusted you. I remember calling him up and I said, Andrew, I went up to see him. I said, Andrew, I need to borrow $500,000. I want to take over the TV studios here. And Andrew looked at me and said, let's go for a walk. We walked the full length of Dunedin and back. We got back and he just looked at me and says, you got the $500,000.
Wow.
Now, if he hadn't done that, none of this would be in place now. So again, those key moments. And the cool thing about that was he's no longer my bank manager. He was now my partner. I treated him as a partner. So now I could ring him up and say, hey, Andrew, it's Ian. We've got you and me, we've got a bit of a problem. Can you come down? But that relationship was built on trust. And again, when something's on trust, the one thing I knew that we would never do, we would never let Andrew down, ever. And so that's how it built.
Yeah.
You know, and so we got to the stage, even after he left, that culture stayed. And so the next person that was brought on still had that same culture. And I mean, it must, business people still marvel at the idea that I could just make a phone call, say, it's Ian, look, I need $500,000 for about 6 weeks. Is that okay? Fine, it's done. because they always knew they could trust you. It's interesting now, that trust has kind of disappeared, even with that track record. So now we find that you're now grinding through the bureaucracy of a lot of stuff, which will make, which would make what I've done in the past impossible.
Yeah, so those were really key elements to
They are.
your success, because you would have been stopped otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just in that, so I see Brother Morris, I see Mike Stedman, I see Spot On, I see all these steps, and I see Andrew Wilson, the bank manager who trusted me.
And so how did that evolve into animation research ultimately?
Well, again, crazy things, so even while I had the TV going, I used to fill in as the newsreader down there and used to read on the South Tonight. And one day, because I'd done a story about computer graphics, which I knew nothing about, but it was clearly the future. And then the next week, they did a story about 4 students from Otago University who'd just gone to America and won the World Computer Programming Champs. They're the first non-American team ever to do it. That they beat, all the big guns, Harvard, Caltech, Stanford.
Brilliant.
And there they were just down the road at my old alma mater. So I thought, I don't know anything, but they must. So I just went down and saw their professor. And I looked around at all the stuff they're doing. Thought, this is amazing, Jeff. If we put that with what we're doing, I always joke, we could one day get a job in Auckland. So we decided on a handshake to start a computer graphics company in Dunedin. That was all, nothing written down. It was a handshake, and I think 4 or 5 of the students, 2 from that team, came over and started working with me in the basement of the building we're still in. And
Incredible.
That's where it started. So again, these footsteps, one of the things in 1989 that Jeff said to me, Professor Wyville, he actually said, Ian, digital data is going to be the currency of the future. The big opportunity is turning digital data into pictures people can understand. And when I look at everything we've done, that's exactly what we've done. The changes, the data went from 2 bits of data in America's Cup, an XY point on the back, to literally thousands of bits of data arriving from Major League Baseball, from golf, every second. And what are we doing? We're turning it into pictures that go on screens, go on your mobile phone, go on everywhere. So the footsteps are just continue. So that, when you come up to something like, well, again, footsteps, when you look out, you also can see footsteps others have laid down. And it was a real eye-opener for me that when we decided we're going to build a company in Dunedin, never leave Dunedin, but would take on the world from there, we had no idea how we were going to do it. That was 1990. Now, I don't know if you knew, but in 1990, the World Wide Web was invented by Tim Berners-Lee. The year we decided to take on the world from Dunedin, Tim Berners-Lee on the other side of the world created the electronic highway that allows us to do it.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that at the time, but again, that's the importance of the footsteps. You go, look at that. We did, there it is. So with the rise of AI, it's the same thing. Now I've got all those footsteps from the World Wide Web or electricity, the light bulb, all the way through to AI. And I'm surrounded by people who look at this with curiosity and know it's going to change everything.
Well, I think when we look back, technology, electricity, you put all these things together, and life would be unrecognizable without them. Now, I'm really curious, because the vision that you had there at the beginning, obviously joining up the dots from what you'd learned, what you'd seen, the connections you had made in the television industry, and then joining technology together, that all, that sounds great. But how did you turn that into a business when at that point the technology must have been very, very expensive? So it was great that you had some people there, but I don't imagine that the sort of technology that would, I guess, be easy for you to sell and so on would have been easy to get your hands on. So you would have been raising more money at that point?
No, we never raised money.
No?
I've never took on investors.
Okay.
No.
So what, the bank, or did you borrow
So we
money
borrowed that.
again?
We borrowed that money from the bank
Yeah.
and paid it back.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think it was a floating loan for a very long time. One of the other, again, whakatokis or proverbs I take is from Lord Ernest Rutherford. He's reported to have said to his staff as they set out to split the atom, we don't have the money, so we have to think.
Yes.
And when I look at what we've done, that's exactly what has happened. I was fortunate to be surrounded by people who knew how to think, and money wasn't an issue. The reason I didn't, back in those days, bring on any investors was that I couldn't be sure that if I took their money, I wouldn't lose it. So our house was mortgaged. Everything we had was mortgaged to the hilt, but that was my call. So no one else. And I'm glad. And again, that's that intergenerational thinking. So again, people are surprised that we didn't actually make our first profit that we could take out of the business if we chose to so we started in 1990, made our first profit in 2000. So that's a long time. And I never noticed that we hadn't made one because we lived within our means. You know, the old aunties, you don't buy anything if you don't have the money to pay for it.
Yes.
Don't you go using those silly credit card things, you know. If you've got the money, you can buy it. So, you know, businesses today all launch on their first round fundings and you know, it makes sense. I get, you know, that wasn't for me. And actually, if you think about it, if I'd tried to sell the idea to a group of investors that I was going to start a computer graphics company in Dunedin at the bottom of the world, who was going to invest in that anyway? So we never raised money through that, but we did always reinvest. I had the luxury, I guess, everyone thinks of animation research as sitting there on its own, but actually it was a division or small part of TaylorMade Media that had these contracts for making all these children's shows, you know, so we were making a lot of television. So that was what was carrying ARL at the time.
You were able to, support
So
that off.
we
all your
supported
other
and just
work.
let them go crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, one of the first things we started doing was I showed some of the stuff that we were capable of doing in graphics to the Holmes producer, Paul Holmes. They said, well, could you make us an opening title? Because we don't know how to do that. We did the opening titles for One Network News. We did them for sports. So there were jobs like that happening. And then out of the absolute blue, I got a phone call from a producer, director of commercials, had seen some of the stuff we were doing and just said, look, I want to come and talk to you. I've got this job for United Airlines in America and I can't find anyone who could do it. Can I come down and see you? So he came down, we looked at it, and the guy said, well, you know, we could do that. And so from having no money, very little, this one arrived with a budget of $250,000.
Fantastic.
I know. It just happened. It was like, oh my God. And we'd never made a commercial at all. And the first thing we had to do was buy the biggest hard drive in the country at the time. You know, it cost $15,000, was 1 gigabyte. And when we got it to render, I mean, the thing about it was the fastest in the country, but it took 7 minutes to render one frame of the commercial. And there are 25 of those to every second, and it was 60 seconds long. So I can still remember we all took turns sleeping under the desk while it was rendering, just in case it stopped. And when I was under the desk, I had no idea what to do if it stopped. So all I had to do was make a phone call.
Yes.
But again, this is the thinking back then. I think it was George Seeley at the time went, actually, I can write a program that can send me a signal from the computer if it stops. So you don't have to sleep under we'll just go home and it'll signal us.
Perfect.
And they did that back then.
Yes. Yeah.
We never used it again for anything,
Yeah.
but it solved a problem we had at the time.
Yeah. Talk about the talent, the people that you worked with. You mentioned this group,
The geeks.
you know, the geeks that won in the
All
US.
of them
and then-
are still there.
okay, and
Which
then
is
they came to
remarkable.
work for you. It seems
They came
as
to
though
work with me.
I like it. Yep.
I know, I'm not
That's-
just
that's-
saying
that's,
that.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, they came.
Yeah.
So I'd share with you then again another lesson from the band. So I remember I was given a doctorate at Otago University, and everybody at work just thought it was hilarious. I was being giving a doctorate for business.
Yeah.
They got they've got it. Don't they know about you? So anyway, one of the things I had to do was accept it and then walk up and talk, and give a little 7-minute speech. And I actually wasn't sure what I was going to say anyway. So I went out and footsteps we laid down, right? So I stood up and here I am on the stage of the town hall in Dunedin, where my first trip to Dunedin was as a singer in the band. And I played to that on this stage to a room full of people just like that.
Wow.
And as I walked out, those footsteps came back to me. So I was able to open with, I remember my first trip to Dunedin ever. I was a singer in a band. I walked out on these steps and sang. Now, one of the most valuable lessons I've learned from being a singer in the band is that's all I was. I was just the singer. I didn't know how to play any instruments. I couldn't play anything. I just stood out the front and sang. The magicians were those who'd taken time to learn to play the instruments who stood beside me. So I was just the singer in the band then. I am still just the singer in the band today as I accept this award for the magicians that stand alongside me. And I believe that. And it's a powerful lesson. You're just the singer in the band.
That's a great way to put it.
But again, the power of the whakatauki, those footsteps are always in front of you. I just wonder if I wasn't aware of that whakatauki as I walked out there, would I have remembered those footsteps? It just was blindingly obvious as I walked out. I was walking back along my old footsteps.
Yeah. So it seems like over the years you have worked with a lot of folks who have maybe started out as students and come sort of straight to animation research.
Yeah. And, again, I mentioned John Rendell, he came straight from school.
Yeah. So how did you facilitate that and how did that work out? Because I see I've had something similar in my business over the years. We've brought people that have come straight from school that have done very well, people that have come from studying, but a lot of businesses are really looking for those that have got lots and lots of runs on the board and are just able to kind of hit the ground running in particular areas. But of course, if you're dealing with cutting edge technology, there isn't necessarily a whole lot of people around that can have the years of experience. It's sort of like going out and looking for someone with 10 years of experience with generative AI. They're not going to be too many people around with those sorts of skills. How's that played out for you, and how have you made that?
Well, I mean, I think it's accurate, but I don't think I've ever hired anybody. Our staff hire. They do all of the hiring. They spend a lot of time, and it's always based on the culture. Not necessarily, they do look at degrees and things now, but initially, for my thing, when I looked at people coming in, it was all, just show me what you've done. And why did you do it? And you soon get the idea of the culture going, you're going to fit. You're cool. You're in. Because you are now surrounded by some of the sharpest minds in the world. So nothing you do at university is going to match what you get here with these people. And the most important thing is that we need you to fit into the culture. You need to match the culture. And I've noticed, even as we're looking to employ more people now, so I think we're up to about 55, and as we employ, the amount of time that John and Ben and Cheryl and the key people that they work, the amount of time they spend looking for the right person. They just keep doing everybody's under stress going, we really need somebody to do this, but we're not picking anybody. It has to be the right person. So they take their time. And again, you just touched on AI. One of the things we're seeing now, though, is that using AI to its real strengths is it's starting to take over those spaces where you go, we need to hire. Oh, actually, could I just do this with AI? And it can. It's a thing of understanding where its power is, and it is incredibly powerful. What does that do really well? That takes all of this effort away from us and means that actually we don't really need someone to do the full job. because AI can do 60, 70% of it already. It will probably be able to do 100% of it quite soon. So that's our big focus now. We thought originally that we would have to find somebody with the generative AI skills, and as you said, they'll be rare. And it wasn't until, I think it was my son Ben, just said, actually, the best expert we can bring on board is AI itself. It has got all of the skills. And when he brought me into using it, I said, how do I do it? He said, you just start by saying, I've never used you before. How do I use you best? Now I use it all the time. And it's taken me down that path very, very quickly. And so our people who are working with it now are having this relationship where they know what it can do for them really quickly and you can trust. They know there's bits here that we're kind of interesting, but I'll take over now. But it's making a huge difference.
What aspects, do you see within your world with ARL where you've got that mix of, creativity, innovation, business smarts? There's there must be a whole lot of skills. Where do you see AI being most helpful? Because I imagine across the business that probably everybody can benefit from AI, but where do you see it has the biggest opportunities and can bring the biggest uplift within your organisation? And I know you do a lot of public speaking, talking to others, and encouraging them to be looking at how to leverage AI. Where are those big opportunities that you see?
Well, first of all, it's just a tool at the moment. Like we've been able to say that about everything that has come. It's just a tool. This one is in a different league from being just a tool. Again, one of the things is the genie's out of the bottle. It is here, and it's only when you start to work with it that you start to realize how powerful it is and how fast it's moving and how it can be used for good, but equally how it could be used for bad. And that's a human fault, not AI's fault. We're using it and, we're building a full education platform. One of the things that really concerns me about the new education curriculum, and, I have to say that I'm really enjoying Erica Stanford is open to these discussions and, she talks about her driver for education is to make sure there's equity in it. So hopefully we can show her how we can use AI to accelerate the equity that education totally needs.
Yes.
But I guess the concern I have is that the education system isn't dealing with AI at all. And most of the discussions have been, how do we know kids haven't used it to cheat? The word cheat and AI should never be put in the same sentence. AI is incredibly powerful. And I'm watching my son teach his 4-year-old ways to use it and put it in context. And one of the most important things that Franco's learning already is that you can make it make mistakes,
Yes.
It's not everything, but it can give you answers really fast. And I've seen a program that Ben's done with Franco, and Franco loves reading and stories. And so now he has this AI agent where he sits and he and the AI write stories for his 2-year-old sister. So, there's this creativity. That's what I think is a risk. The risk we run with the structured numeracy and literacy is that we start to lose what humans have more than anything else, creativity. That's what makes us different. And to sit there and watch, I worry about kids using devices and stuff, but to watch Franco sit and talk with this absolute font of knowledge who's talking in his language, he's talking to it in his language, and they are exploring creative solutions, and he's learning. And what I love is it's writing the stories for his little sister.
That's really cool.
Did I answer the question? I probably didn't. I never do, actually, do I?
Well, sometimes I lose track of what the question is too, but I'm enjoying this, and I think there's a lot to take on board.
I'll tell you, I guess going back to turning digital data into pictures people can understand. And, the America's Cup, an XY coordinate. Today, it's thousands. I have an example, and I show people, this is the data we get from 160 cameras at a golf course. They are measuring every shot of every player, of every ball, spin rate, apex, the way they walk, it's phenomenal. And when you watch it on a screen, it's just pouring down. And I show one screen that runs for about 30 seconds, and then I tell them that's a 6.5 foot putt. That data, and at any given time, there are 14 balls in the air, any given time of a tournament. That is a monumental amount of data, and there's no way a human can figure out. Even when you look at the data, it doesn't make any sense. So Ben was at a tournament. While the tournament was on, he was looking at all this data because it's all new. Thought, how do we? And he thought, I'll just try. I think he tried Grok or something.
Yes.
So he went in, and in an afternoon, Grok wrote a full program that allowed them to turn that data into data that says, of this ball, the apex of the ball was this, it was spinning at that rate, this was this is how the wind affected it, this huge stuff that it did it that afternoon, and we were applying it to the graphics the next day. Now, I don't know how long it would have taken any of our team to do that. Probably so long we wouldn't have even started.
Yes.
But AI did it straight away. And that's the example. Again, worth thinking about, but Ben had never written a line of code in his life, but here was this code. And the guy sitting beside him was a coder. He'd done a degree. And he said, oh my God, does that mean my job's gone? And Ben, I thought Ben's response was really cool. He said, no, imagine this. I've never written a line of code, and this is what I have got it to do. Imagine what you will be able to get it to do. It will be another level up. That's what your strength is.
Yeah, I've had similar sort of conversations with coders on my team around some of these aspects where you can see at times they have those sort of concerns, as I think many people do, and I think it's important to recognise actually you've got a great leverage of the technology.
It is important because a lot of people want to stay away from that kind of scary territory, but that scary territory is here. And I spoke to a guy who is one of the lead developers at a massive SaaS company in Europe, huge. So they've got Apple as their client, NASA, all of those. And he told me that they are now no longer hiring PhDs because the AI that they've trained is well above the PhDs that they would used to have hired. And then he really surprised me. He said, at the moment, I think it's probably between 60 and 70% of my skill level. And he was there from the start. And we are now planning for a future 3 years out where my job won't be there either. Now, when you start to hear that coming from programmers in a company like that, you have got to take it seriously, and you have got to start thinking, if that's the case, what's our role? And we've got to find it. They're not, and everybody says there'll be jobs that nobody's thought of. Well, actually, it's time to start thinking what those jobs are and determining what they will be. The tendency is, we'll just sit back and they will pop up. But what if they don't? Or, we've got to think differently. An AI guy I was talking to, who went to a speech he mentioned, I think, something like there will be, over the next 5 years, it will replace 85 million jobs, but it will create 95 million. And I couldn't resist it. I just said, so could you name just one of those? And he had to pause. And then when he started talking about it, I go, yeah, really? We have to start creating those 95 million jobs as humans. People often say, think of us as a technology company. We are not a technology company. We are storytellers. And we use technology to tell stories, turn digital data into pictures people can understand. And it doesn't matter what it is. If it's an air traffic control simulator, if it's a visualization of the rebuild of Christchurch, if it's an AI program, these are things we've done that teaches numeracy and literacy in prisons. What is it doing? It's telling stories.
Well, that's certainly something that is never going to go away, right? That need to tell stories, whether it's to educate and inform, to entertain. That's always going to be around. And I think there's that human creativity element, becomes very, very important. But I guess one of the ways I tend to look at this, and certainly, like you, I don't have, and the chap that you were talking with around the AI jobs, I don't have all those answers. But certainly, when I look back, even we had the fibre rollout in New Zealand, the ultra fast broadband. Yeah, that was something that really excited me in terms of the opportunity for New Zealand. But when the questions came, as they inevitably did, of, well, why do we need these sorts of speeds, and why is this so important? Probably a lot of times along the way, it was hard to work out why we would necessarily need the sort of those sort of speeds, and yet
that was never a question in our place.
No, I guess for your work, you could do.
Not even for our work.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, for everything. So if you thought of the internet as being an electronic highway, what the constraint we would have if we didn't move was that the highway was out there, and we were on a 2-lane or 1-lane road trying to get to the highway. And that was going to cost us as a country, because as we started to move from exporting meat and food and then started to shift ideas and IP, this highway had to be a quadruple-laned highway. So always it was important. It is absolutely critical for our education system. The government, the original governments built all the highways because they were important. Then they handed off this next lot of most important highway, which I will leave it to private industry. So what do? They go, yes, we'll build a fast one over here, but Little Ropinga, we don't need you. There's still schools there. Ruatoria, there's still schools there. You cannot run an education system, you cannot run a school that doesn't have high-speed internet into it to enable them to acknowledge the biggest library in the world. Massive. And now that AI is there, it is even more important that the first place we need to get this stuff is schools, and then to the homes.
Yes. Yeah.
Then, but what do? It's going, oh no, business is the most important. Well, actually, no. We need to get it to our schools, because we are falling behind the 8 ball as it is. There is an enormous opportunity with AI, because the whole world's kind of looking at how they do it. But countries like Singapore, Finland, and China already are making it the core of the education system. So why does our government talk about Singapore as a role model for business, and then you go, they're doing that, we'll just ignore what they're doing in education? We should be leading the world in this. We're small enough to lead the world, and it's actually not that hard.
What do you think is the biggest change that needs to be made in education from your journey? What would you say you've learned and you feel that
we have to really, really openly and honestly ask the question: is structured numeracy and literacy the way to go? Given that we now have at our fingertips AI, is that really where our focus should be? Now, the real risk is it turns into a fight. We go, yes, it is. We've got all the scientific evidence. You've got all this. But, if anybody tells you that you've got to do this because science proves it, they're not a scientist. Because the most important thing about science is it's always changing. It is
So
never,
true.
ever fixed. And anyone who says he's a scientist and tells you that this is a fact is not a scientist. And so when you look, and I look at the curriculum as it exists, and it is not equipping. But what's happening there will not give me, as a company, as a business, the kind of creative thinking that we need. I asked AI about, what was the importance of AI in an education system, and it said, I said, just give me one line that I could use that could resonate with people, so I'll test it with you. Given that machines can answer almost any question you ask, we need to teach our tamariki how to ask better questions.
It's great.
That's what AI gave me.
Yeah.
And, you need to get these things and go, yeah. So now let's have that discussion. Is structured numeracy and literacy going to help us do that? And if the answer is yes, that's great. But if the answer is no, or it'll do part of it and it's critical as part of it, but it is not the answer. And the position I would take now, happy to have the discussions, but it is not the answer. Because what I've seen is, we're doing it now. There's not a written word in sight in this conversation. It's two people talking, and there are lessons being learnt. There is experience being shared. There's creative thinking happening as we speak. So that's Cicero. Back in the old days, the students sat in front of the font of knowledge and they talked. They didn't write because they didn't have writing. One of the things from a Māori perspective is all of our knowledge is in the arts and oratory. It's only recently that we've had to learn to read a book, because that's how somebody decided you got this information, because they didn't have the resources to put people sitting right in front of you one-on-one to share this knowledge. AI does that now. You can sit with the most patient person in the world, question and answer and ask and solve problems. And I don't need to know how to do pi minus so-and-so, such and so. Well, in fact, I don't even know how to do it. But as we go, you're looking at this thing and you realize that that's an equation that has to be solved, and you know why it has to be solved. Now, could you solve it for me, please? Because there's only one answer in this equation, and I could spend half an hour trying to do it. You can do it in a second. So just give me the answer. Great. Now, here's my question. How do we go from here? So the thing about AI is, or where we're going with artificial intelligence, is that it's a tool. What we run the risk of with the kind of rote learning that's happening in schools is that we're dealing with, let me take E equals MC squared. So I go to school and they teach me about E equals squared, blah, 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 blah. That's a problem that's already been solved. So you're teaching me something that Einstein did ages ago. How did he do it? What was his creative thinking? Because we have to take that thinking and solve the next problem that hasn't been solved. That's what we want coming out of schools. Kids who are thinking, what's the next problem? I know E equals M. I can't remember what E equals MC squared, but I'll ask ChatGPT. What did that mean and why was it important? Ah, yes, that's why. Oh, now that can help me do this. That's, imagine how much fun school would be. Give you an example. Can I give you an example of what we've done for education using AI? So we've just been to Rarotonga and shared a lesson. So one of the things that we think is important is that if you're going to learn maths and literacy and science and physics, you should learn it in our context. So we start with the idea that 3,500 years ago, Polynesian voyagers started crossing the Pacific Ocean using celestial navigation. It is remarkable. They also designed the first catamarans ever in the world. When they ran into Captain Cook couldn't understand how these things with sails could sail around him, because his boat couldn't do that.
Yes.
And these are these natives. So you do that, but you take it all the way. So first of all, the context of our education system, for me, is we came here in state-of-the-art craft, guided by the stars, sun, and ocean currents. And today, a young guy from Invercargill, who doesn't have any degrees, is launching state-of-the-art craft into the stars that brought us here in the first place. Now, what if we took that as the context for our education platform, that whole journey, all of those footsteps, Rutherford, Zero, Hamilton Jets, all of those, and all our maths, physics, science was done in the context of us, because now our kids go, we are pretty bloody amazing, and I don't need their examples overseas. So the example I give here for this one is Archimedes' principle. So we're going to teach Archimedes' principle today, and you start in a classroom, and it's fun because this guy called Archimedes jumps into the bath The water spills over the side, and he's so excited he jumps out naked and runs down the street. And kids are laughing, you know. They're going, oh, what? And then you take a glass and you put it there. And then you say to the kids, fill it to the top. There's the top. Drop a pet rock in it. Now take the rock out. And now they're playing. But they're watching Archimedes' principle in thing. So that's maybe the first week. The second week of this lesson plan says, now we want to apply it in another way. So see these 3 boats here? That's a waka haurua that was used by our Polynesian voyagers to come to Aotearoa. That's the Endeavour that was used by Captain Cook to cross the Pacific to come to New Zealand. And that's Team New Zealand's foiling monohull that solves Archimedes' principle by just taking the hull out of the water. And that boat travels at 100 kilometres an hour without an engine. Now, here is a 3-month curriculum exercise based on those that deal to numeracy, literacy, physics, everything. And it's in the context of our great thinkers.
Brilliant.
And our kids need to grow up knowing this is in our DNA. We keep bowing to, what are they doing over there? What do they do? We need to step back and go, hey, what did we do here?
That's good. Now, before we wrap up, one thing I always like to do is to delve into some of those harder moments in the journey. Can you share with us, 1 or 2 moments or periods within the business that were challenging? We obviously talked a little bit around COVID and your approach to that, but I'm sure there must be some other ones that stand out for you, Ian.
Well, I get often asked this, and I just don't think of them in that context.
Yep.
And one, I do share one, which, and all normal descriptions would fit that perfectly. But for me, it was just a lesson learned, valuable lesson learned. So I remember when we first started doing cricket, we were the first company to do cricket. And one of the things we initially didn't do was we looked at tracking the ball. But when we looked at it, it was going to be really expensive to do, and we knew it wouldn't be all that accurate, so we didn't do it. Now, another company did, and the minute they bought that out, even though it wasn't all that accurate, we started losing all of our contracts. And we lost a lot.
Wow.
And then one day, I got a call from India, a guy called James Rejo. See, I still remember his name. An important. And James rang and said, hey, listen, we're looking at Hawkeye and all this sort of stuff. Can you guys do this? I said, oh, yeah, do cricket? Yeah. He said, can you do ball tracking? I said, could you give me a minute? And I turned to this guy wants to know, could we do ball tracking? I love the answer I always get is, don't see why not. So I said to James, yeah, we don't do it at the moment, but pretty confident we can. So long story short, I said, how long have you got? He said 8 weeks. So in 8 weeks, this team designed a ball tracking system. Now, it wasn't being used for umpiring, but anyway, so we signed this contract with it. We ended up, and we paid for all of that ourselves. That's the risk. They didn't pay for anything unless it worked. So we got there and a couple of things went wrong, and I thought that was a disaster, but it wasn't our fault. The stuff worked, but the environment didn't work for us. So we put cameras on stands, and the minute 100,000 people got on them, they shook.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. So anyway, we managed to get through, and then James said, look, I got another 6 weeks, come to Sri Lanka. If you've got that problem solved, the contract's yours. Long story short, we got it. So now we've just spent close to $2 million of our own money developing this, but we've got this 5-year contract. So that's cool. Less than a year in, Lalit Modi, who was the head of the BCCI, informed James that he'd just done a deal with Hawkeye for the IPL, and part of that deal was they had our contract as well, so you had to dump us. And we got dumped. And when I went to look and talk to lawyers, there was nothing we could do about it because we'd have to go to court in India and we were going to lose it. It was just going to take too long. So we lost all of that. The long story short, the end result of that was after 4 or 5 months trying to figure out what I did, I came to the conclusion that we were going to have to close. So I can still remember, we still talk about that as being a risk. I still don't think it was. It had to happen. So I can still remember with my wife going into work together, everyone together, to say, I'm sorry, but, we've got this $2 million debt. we've got to do this, we've got to do that. We're closing the business today. It's against the law to keep running. And as I got in there, Ellie, who's that receptionist who's still with us, had the ODT, and she was reading it, and she looked at it and said, "Oh my God, how awful would this be?" And she held up the paper, and on the front page it said, "Fisher and Paykel are laying off 480 people at their factory out on the Tyree." And I looked at it and I turned to Liz and said, "Shit, we can't do it today." And we didn't. And I went away and a crazy idea came to me that I hadn't thought of. It was so outrageous. I thought, I'll try this. And we pulled it off. I managed to do something that got it. But again, trying conditions, absolutely. Close down, that's the worst case scenario, I guess. And, it would be hard times. I don't see it as such because that newspaper article, if it hadn't been there, if they hadn't closed on that day, we would have, and you and I wouldn't be having this discussion.
Incredible.
Somebody else's footsteps changed my footsteps, and here we are today. But we would not be here today if Fisher and Paykel hadn't closed their factory. So I don't know if you could say that's tough times or challenge.
That sounded like a challenging time.
So-
and did it take you long to
Well-
kind of turn things around?
No, it was
new
really
opportunity that you saw.
It was really interesting. After we took that step, a whole lot of things started to fall in place really, really fast. It just kind of happened, and we've never looked back. I do, if I'm to be fair about the stress, I tend to sort of override it at times, but I have to acknowledge my wife at the time, not at the time, still my wife Liz. I think there were times that I tread a line because it was desperate. There were times as I tread the line that I could understand how you could step to one side and contemplate suicide. I mean, it often arose just fleetingly. They'd be better off without me. And then you'd step back, and having my wife there the whole time, grounding that did so. Maybe I shouldn't be so flippant about the challenge, but it just doesn't hang around me anymore. We took the steps. We are where we are.
Yeah.
And it was an incredibly valuable lesson, including the lesson about what the strain and stress can do to you mentally and how important it is to have someone alongside you.
So important. Yeah. And any closing advice? If there's one word of advice for our listeners on top of all the experiences and comments you've shared.
I just share. I always love to share because I've got two boys, Sam and Ben, and I always love to share these because they're an inspiration for me as well. Sam, who is profoundly deaf, I just look at this young kid who never, ever took that on as being something that would hold him back. And Sam today is now a vascular surgeon. And, I look at that journey and it just seemed normal. But as you step back and think, he is a profoundly deaf vascular surgeon. How stunning is that? And the footsteps we laid down, he came through our education system. So instead of racing and going, it's got to change, why don't we look at the footsteps and go, what did they do that allowed this to happen?
Yes.
And then the lesson that I think every business person can take away came from my son, Ben, when he was 8. So I was to give a prize-giving speech at a school, end of year speech. And he came to me and said, "Dad, I need to read your speech." So I gave him my speech and he went away, read it. And he came back and he said, "It's pretty good. I like the stuff about dreaming because I have this thing that you should always dream because the power of the dreams is if you didn't have one, you won't see the opportunity go past you." So, as I thought, I always dreamed of being a singer in a band. And as a 5-year-old seeing Bill Haley and the Comets,
Yes.
I always thought I would be in a band one day.
Wow.
So when Bernard knocked on the door, there was the dream.
Perfect.
So he said, "So, yeah, but you haven't got everything." I said, "So you've missed out the most important bit." Now I'm taking advice from an 8-year-old. I said, "So what's the important bit, Ben?" He said, "Well, it's really, really important to have dreams. But the most important thing is they come to nothing if you don't get out of bed."
Perfect.
And if I look at our business,
yeah.
we got out of bed. There is no other way to describe it. And I think there'll be business people out there listening to this now, or people starting to follow their dream. Get out of bed.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege to hear your story and to hear from you. So all the best for what's ahead.
Kapai, thank you.
Thanks for listening in to this episode of the New Zealand Business Podcast. Be sure to look up our other episodes featuring many of New Zealand's most innovative and successful founders and leaders, such as Sir Peter Beck of Rocket Lab, Sir Graham Henry, former All Blacks coach, Rod Drury, founder of Xero, many, many more. The New Zealand Business Podcast is proudly brought to you by Gorilla Technology, the information technology services firm helping medium and smaller organisations maximise their uplift from innovative technology use whilst minimising cyber risks. If it's time to start or accelerate your artificial intelligence enablement across your organisation, then visit gorillatechnology.com today and inquire about how we can help. Feel free to ask for me, Paul Spain. Thanks again for listening in. This is Paul Spain signing out. I'll catch you on the next episode of the New Zealand Business Podcast.
The New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you